Joining me now with her thoughts on the biggest environmental challenges currently facing governments around the world is Kari Fulton, Interim Director of the Environmental Justice and Climate Change Initiative. Kari Fulton, welcome to The Heat. How bad is the problem with climate change, would you say?
I think it's a major issue that's oftentimes overlooked, not only by certain governments, but also by the general public. We tend to go our day-to-day lives and focus on the more immediate things, but climate change is definitely real and happening all around us.
What about all the conflicting information, though, that people watching this broadcast they're getting bombarded all the time? It's like, the world's coming to an end, but then the other side, oh, this is all a bunch of hooey. And it seems like everyone's able to pull up a report and say, this says this and this says that. How can someone watching this broadcast dig and get the information they need?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a scientist. I'm an organizer and a mobilizer. But I will say that all around us, we can look and see that things are not what they used to be. You can look right now at the background. We have the ice glaciers that are melting, and that's going to create major issues. We also have heat rising and droughts. And then thinking about that from a layperson perspective is just, you know, the reports are important, but are you really sitting down and watching reports? No, you're sitting in your hot apartment and you're realizing that somehow it seems hotter than it was the summer before that. Or you're having more storms and you're having harder storms like Superstorm Sandy. So the longer that we want to be the bird that puts our head down in the bottom of the sand, the more that we're going to have to continue dealing with the higher risk of adapting to climate change.
It's interesting you bring this up, and I don't want to sound like Sarah Palin, you know, where I could look out and I could see Russia, but these smaller countries like Finland, Norway, Denmark, who really can look outside and see what's happening in terms of the melting, the glacial melting. The Iceland's president was just at the National Press Club, gave an address there, and he said the sea ice levels are the lowest point in recorded history. And he says the world is waking up. But is the world waking up? And if so, are they waking up quick enough?
Well, I'll speak about America. I've gone to a lot of different international negotiations, and I will say that countries and foreign entities like the European Union, they're starting to wake up. And even China is starting to wake up and starting to become a leader when it comes to wind and solar and renewable energy. Now, here in America, we need to wake up. I think that we have seen these storms time and time again, and we've seen them get worse and worse. So I think you have a general public that's ready to wake up, but it just needs an extra push.
Well, let's talk about these countries, though, too. You're talking about America, you're talking about China. Some of the bigger countries, it seems like they've got their own issues they've got to deal with, and much larger populations, so the emission levels are going to be higher than the smaller countries. And changing things on a dime, it's very difficult for them. And yet, when you look at the analysis, it's the United States maybe emitting more than anybody else, but they're not the ones dealing with the drought. It's the folks in Africa. And some people argue that that's part of the problem. It's the people who are doing these sorts of things, they don't really see the results. They're not being impacted. It's impacting elsewhere. How do you convey that message?
In a few different ways. A lot of the communities that we work with are communities of color. So we work with a lot of people who are first generation or who have relatives that go back to a lot of developing countries that are being directly impacted by these droughts and by these storms. And we also work closely with these different countries and their grassroots leaders, helping them to come over to the States and share their stories with people like us, everyday people. So we need to know that. And I think that the more that we have a sense of empathy, the more that we can grow globally. Unfortunately, it often takes us having something happening here right in our own neck of the woods to really feel something, and that's unfortunate.
I hate to make blanket statements, but I'll go right ahead and make a blanket statement after saying that. When I'm around my kids, this is something they're passionate about. Young people like yourself, very passionate about. When I'm around my peers, they're worrying about they're getting their kids to college or their 401k or the stock market. It doesn't seem to be top of mind. Is this a generational divide?
Yes and no. I think that you have a generation that has a lot of big issues that they have to deal with. We have economic crises, we have real family priorities that are going on. And then you have a younger generation that is ready and willing to look at the future. And we're willing to see that our future for us is in our control. And a lot of what's happening today is in your control. So it's best if we push, but we have to work together because we know that a lot of things that have happened before will happen again, and they'll always continue to be that way.
Young people also very inspired, excited about President Obama when he was elected, hope and change. Has there been enough change as far as the environment? What would you give him in terms of an environmental report card? And I see you smiling a little bit. This is a tough one for you, isn't it?
It is. I would give him a C because he is trying. And I think that in the political climate that we live in, it's very difficult to get things done because you do have a lot of people who have a lot of valued interest in keeping things the way that they are. But the more that we see people moving across political lines, the more that we can move towards real solutions. And so I really feel that our president is doing the best that he can right now to push those lines. But we also need people to meet in the middle because it's bigger than politics.
Okay, you're talking about pushing, but how do you push him to do more? How do you push Congress to do more? How do you get the results you want?
I think it's a really localized issue. Most people think about climate change from the global perspective, but a lot of what's going to happen is on the local level. Everybody will not see climate change the same way. So when you see governors like Chris Christie, who's like, hey, President Obama came in and when we needed help, I don't care what anybody else has to say, that's an example of pushing that nonpartisan support for an issue that's important for everyone. And we have to see more of that. We have to see more localized support for looking at climate change and climate adaptation.
Kari Fulton, thank you for coming in and joining us here on The Heat.
Thank you so much.